up, baseball fans? Welcome to yet another episode of the one and only baseball podcast, Put Me in Coach, a podcast where we talk about America's pastime, baseball. My name is Matt Coggins.
And my name is Carl Mizell, and I've never even heard of another baseball podcast, so lucky you, listener.
Name one, other than this one. Name one other podcast that talks about baseball. You can't.
You can't do it. You can't.
What's up? You're in unfamiliar territory today.
I am. I'm in a bifurcated, it looks like you got this wall here for those of you on YouTube. I am at the finest hotel that money can buy in Grayling, Michigan. For work this week. So days in Grayling, overall fine experience. Wi-Fi kind of spotty, so hopefully we can get through this with minimal problems. I miss my fiber internet back home. How are you, friend?
Not too bad. Last week, thank you so much for taking over the hosting duties with your wife, Katie. It was a fun episode to listen to, kind of being the outsider looking in on your own podcast.
I know. It's like riding in the passenger seat of your own car.
Yeah. I had 2 games last week. One got rained out, but I did get to play one on Monday. And boy, when you're the reason your team lost, and I know it's a team game and everybody says it, but I had the winning run out. I had the winning out right there. I was playing third base. I don't know why they put me at third. I had it 2 outs. There were people on. I had a force out at third. I could have just tagged the base, and it would have been over. The game would have been over. We would have won. And I threw to first instead, and I threw it wide. And I literally had an outfielder in my ear going, "Why would you do that? That's the hardest throw you could have made. It could have been any base." So we lost.
Could have been the one right in front of you.
Could have been that one. So we lost. And I'm hoping I don't get put on third again. I was like, can you just put me in the outfield? I want to run. I don't want to throw.
I think you made that choice for them by making that throw.
Please.
I don't think you're going to have that problem again. I saw that happen when I played in Philadelphia. A guy on my team, real nice guy named Paul. It was literally like 2 outs, bottom of the 7th. We only played 7-inning games. But there were a couple runners on, so he popped it up to the infield, and everybody's running. Running, and sure enough, a couple guys got around the plate, and he just dropped a pop-up at second base. Felt fucking terrible. And if you think it feels bad, you know, you were playing a softball game, and a dude was yelling at you from the outfield in a company softball game. Now, imagine a bunch of guys in their early 30s and late 20s still trying to live their glory days of baseball. And then losing and dropping a pop-up. Everybody was really nice to his face, but afterwards, they were just like, man, fucking Paul.
Fuck this guy. It did make me feel a little better that I saw Bobby Witt make the same mistake like the next day. I was like, oh, if what everybody considers to be one of the best infielders of the day right now can also forget to tag a base with the force on, maybe I'm not so bad.
No. You are not. I will say this until I'm blue in the face. I mean, baseball all around, hitting a baseball is difficult, but all the other stuff that comes along with it, tracking a fly ball or a pop-up is a very, very difficult thing to do. These guys make it look so fucking easy. It is not, I promise you.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how hard it was to field a ground ball until they're coming at you at 60 miles an hour on Central Park dirt. And I still am wearing a bruise. You probably can't see it on camera, but I'm wearing a bruise from a comebacker that was also, it deflected clean off my arm and went over to second base. I was like, how the fuck did that happen?
Meant to do that. Meant to do it.
So anyway, today we're talking about gambling.
Yeah, it sounds like you're gambling every time you step on the field.
That's right. I am a gambling man. I always thought that was gambling man. It's rambling man. Rambling man. The Allman Brothers song. But we are talking about gambling today. Gambling's been in the news lately. Carl touched on it a little bit. We had some player suspensions last week, and we're digging into it a little bit more this week.
Once again, the curse of put me in coach. I told Katie about Tucupita Mercano on the show and that he might be facing a suspension. And then, like, right after, or maybe the next day, Tucupita Mercano suspended for life and 4 others suspended for a year.
Yeah.
Every goddamn time
Lifetime ban. And we'll get into why he was suspended for a life and others weren't. But before we get into all that, let's get into the baseball news. Yo, we played a series in London this week, the MLB did. Our third international series of the year? I forget. Did we play in Mexico City yet this year?
Not that I recall, no.
No. Okay, so second international series of the year. We covered the international games a little bit earlier in the season, but I thought it was kind of fun that they played in London. The field was terrible. Converted soccer stadium. It's supposed to be an all-purpose stadium, but they play soccer on it. The field was really bouncy, so a couple times you saw what looked to be a sure out, or at the very least a ball that could have gotten cut off, bounce clear over an outfielder's head, and I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And the light was weird. It was like a circular stadium that the sun came in. That what lack of sun Britain has came in through the center, so it was just like. Only like second base and a half of the outfield was in sun and the rest was in shadow. I was like, this is a very different look for baseball. Dimensions were a little weird, but hey, Phillies took game 1. They had a 6-run routing of Sean Manaea. Harper hit a bomb. He celebrated by sliding into the dugout like a soccer player. That was pretty cool. And then the Mets took game 2 in a very Mets fashion. No long balls. Just little bloopers that were bouncing everywhere. They tied it up, and then they loaded the bases, and Pete Alonso was hit by a pitch, so then the go-ahead run comes in, and then they scored one more run on a pass ball. They didn't really put the ball in play to take this lead, right? So you get to the bottom of the 9th, the Phillies also load the bases. They also score a run on a walk, and then the Mets win the game by turning a 2-3 double play, which means the catcher is able to field the ball, tag home, and then throw to first. And while this double play has been pulled before, it's kind of rare, but it's been pulled before. It has never been done before to finish a game. It was an historic game to finish the London series.
Which is fitting for, a special game, a special series. But also, like I said to you in our Discord, I cannot believe in that the hundreds of thousands of games that have been played in Major League history that has never happened. Like,
right.
And that is something that just seems like I know that sometimes we come up with the most bizarre stats to try and like blow people's minds. Like this only the first time in history where some guy's done like these very specific esoteric things. But this just it just seems I can't wrap my head around how this has never happened.
Yeah. And again, you had to get into a very Mets frame of mind to even get to a point in a game where you have the bases loaded, and they did score a run, but to think like a team comes in with the bases loaded and 1 out, usually that team either ties the game or wins the game in that point in the game. So I guess it would be kind of rare that a double play gets turned at all, but especially one in front of the catcher. It was kind of the thought I had, but
yeah, but it's still, like I said, it's how that has never happened. Like we've even had a guy throw back-to-back no-hitters in Major League history.
Yes.
But we've never had this happen. That's crazy.
The fact that anything this day and age can happen for the first time in baseball. Anything.
Yeah.
And it'll happen again.
It will, but maybe not for another 100 years.
Yeah. There was a 2024 player poll that came out from The Athletic this week. They interviewed players. They had about 100 respondents, and the players got to talk about their feelings on the game. And there were some interesting findings. Chief among them, Jazz Chisholm, is apparently deemed the most overrated player.
Yeah.
I didn't know many rated him at all. Otani, Betts, and Acuna were deemed the best or most desired to have on your team, the ones that are like cool. Most players agree the season is too long, but don't think there's a sense in changing it because they get paid for it anyway. Totally agree with that. A plurality of players said that they'd play for Atlanta above all other teams if contracts, state taxes, and rosters were not a factor. I thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm. Maybe just like the idea that they're a winning team or a team that, puts a lot of faith in their roster. A's have a worst reputation by far, with some giving hate to the White Sox, Angels, and Rockies. Kind of the flip side of that relationship.
Yeah.
A lot of players are in favor of playing in the 2028 Olympics, but aren't sure how it would fit into a baseball season, and they're not in favor of canceling the baseball season in favor of the Olympics. I also agree with that. Most agree that the Dodgers' offseason spending spree was good for the game and should inspire other teams to do the same. And they're very split on the ideas of salary floors or caps, generally in favor of a floor, but not a cap. Baseball has neither, and they're the only league to have neither out of the major sports in America. And I found that interesting, the idea that they were sort of like, no, you can't limit how much you pay us, but you should limit how little you can pay us. Makes sense from the players, but I think it's sound.
Yeah, you're never gonna get either one. I would be shocked if Major League Baseball ever did that, because you don't want to tell the owners the minute you try to get a floor, the owners are going to try and claw something back from the players.
Yes,
it's not going to be the cap, but because the union would never go for that. I found that interesting as well. One of my favorite. I'm glad you brought this up, because two things. One, I saw somebody post this on Reddit, I think in the MLB sub, and my favorite comment on it was somebody had mentioned like who has like the best vibe, like who would you like to have in the clubhouse?
Yeah,
and somebody voted for Garrett Cole, and they were like, oh, and the person who commented said, I thought that was really odd until I realized that they said they'd never met him, which I thought was very funny.
Sure.
But then I read it and I saw something. And I was going to go post it in the Tiger sub, but somebody beat me to it. And I was actually really surprised. And that was the team that you would most like to play for. They rattled off all the teams, and then like other teams receiving votes. And I think like 25 teams got votes, but one of the teams that did not get a vote was the Detroit Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody posted that in the Tiger sub. And I was so refreshed. I was so relieved, because I was like, yes, see, this is what I'm talking about, guys.
Nobody wants to play for this fucking team.
Nobody wants to play for this fucking team right now. You can't just throw dollars at somebody and make them come to your team. There are other mitigating factors when it comes to this. Stop saying, give them more money. That's not how this fucking works. Do you want more Javi Baez? Because that's how you get Javi Baez.
I mean, it makes sense, and I feel like people shouldn't need a player poll to tell them that it makes sense, but here we are.
You know who else will tell you that? Trevor May. Go check out Trevor May's amazing YouTube channel. It's excellent, but he will tell you the same thing.
Yeah. Finally in news, this isn't really news, but I feel like it's our first okay, I was wrong with our preseason predictions. I was wrong about the New York Yankees. Adding Soto was absolutely the thing that they needed to change. And obviously they made a lot more additions to the team, but it seems like Juan Soto was the thing that changed this team's offense around. And a big bit of evidence as to why is because he went down with injury right before the series with the Dodgers, and the Yankees offense was just noticeably weaker at home. And yeah, they're the Dodgers, but like the Yankees are the best team in baseball right now. Their offense is insane. They won a game. Fans were literally chanting, "We want Soto," as Grisham hit a go-ahead homer in Game 3, which I thought was really funny. The Bronx loves this guy. They want to sign him the $600 million contract, and honestly, I don't blame them, because he's gone so he's exceeded every expectation amongst obviously people like us who kind of thought he's a little overrated. Even amongst the league who thought he was regularly rated, he's like blown past that. I thought that the Yankees were going to move the needle past their 82-win season last year, and here we are at the 1/3 mark. They're one of the best teams in baseball. The best team? No, the Phillies are.
Yeah.
Judge and Soto are worth somewhere around 8.5 combined WAR, depending on what website you look at. More than the entire roster of the Rays, Marlins, Rockies, or White Sox, and worth more than their highest WAR Yankee of all of last season, which was Garrett Cole at 7.4. That is crazy. And obviously...
And we're a third of the way through, remember?
Yeah, only a third of the way. They have plenty more time to add to that WAR. Judge, I think, was somewhere around 5.5 last year, and obviously he had injury shortened last year. Cole's not even there yet. Like he's coming back from injury. He should be there maybe sometime in the next couple weeks. But the pitching hasn't really needed him. All the starters are floating somewhere around 3 to 3.5 ERA. The rookie hotshot Luis Heel, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
Floating around 2 ERA. He's been amazing. Stroman, who was a guy that they added to the rotation, he's been pretty solid. Stanton doesn't look as lost as he did last year. Verdugo has been awesome. Volpe is one of the best young players in the game. It's not the team they were last year, and they're scary. I don't want to play them again. And I hate to admit anything. I had to rain praise on the Yankees at all because fuck the Yankees, but I admit that I was extremely wrong in the preseason predictions, and I would be shocked if they didn't at least make the playoffs, if not win their incredibly competitive division.
Yeah. This team has vibes of the late 90s Yankees.
Yeah.
The teams where like no one was a true superstar. Derek Jeter had not really become the Derek Jeter that we know now, but they were just a remarkably solid team. It was, and that's what this feels like now. I mean, you're getting contributions 1 through 9 all up and down the lineup. The pitching's holding up. If they can keep it up and sustain it, look the fuck out.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun in September, though, if Baltimore and New York keep winning.
Yeah. Baltimore and Yankees, I guess they would meet in the ALCS, right?
They couldn't.
In the ALDS. No, I couldn't.
No, that I think there's like rules against that. I don't remember, but
either way.
Yeah, either way, it's going to be fun as hell.
Yeah, as hot as the Yankees have been, Baltimore's only like 3 games behind them, which is also crazy.
Jesus Christ.
But more expected.
Yeah, and then the AL Central is not dog water. And then after the NL Central, as of yesterday, I think the Brewers had like a 7-game lead over second place, and then second through fifth were all separated by a half game.
The National League has 2 teams in the wild card hunt under 500. That's what is fucking wild right now. The National League is bad. And you're starting to see a lot of takes from National League fans that are like, I think we should go back to the American League and National League playing each other less. And I was like, oh, do you? Do you?
Too bad.
All right, moving on now to our main topic this week, gambling. So last week, MLB announced their first lifetime ban since the one and only Pete Rose, due to a player gambling on his own team. You said his name earlier. Oh my God, how did I not try this out before we started recording? Young man named Tucupita Marcano from the Pirates. He was formerly with the Padres. He was actually injured for 90% of his time with the Pirates. There were also 4 other players that received a 1-year suspension for gambling. This in the midst of the Ippei Shohei scandal and millions of advertising dollars being poured in from sportsbook sites like FanDuel, who is closing in on the naming rights for Bally Sports. Gambling and baseball, they seem to be reaching a real decision point. So I wanted to look at how we got where we are, what it's doing to the sport, like how it's affecting not just the fans but the players themselves, and what the future could look like. And I don't really have answers on the latter, but I think we'll have a conversation about it. So to start off, I wanted to talk about baseball's relationship with gambling, and you might be surprised to learn that gambling and baseball predates baseball. Baseball was built on gambling before teams were even established in the big metro areas. A lot of them were kind of spread across the country in river towns and rural communities, so there weren't any like big casinos or betting parlors or horse tracks or anything like that. Eventually the riverboat casino would become popular, but this is even before that started to become a thing. But here's this highly competitive regional sport chock full of stats and benchmarks and little records that people could set. And the average Joe could take that math and make wagers on it. And the players did too, because their pay was so low. The players often took bets on the side just to stay solvent. And in the same vein, game fixing was also incredibly prominent back in the day. There was a documented case from 1865, which was years before baseball was even technically baseball. A wealthy gambler bribed a few New York players to throw their next game because he had money on the other team. In 1877, while the National League got its start, 4 Louisville players were similarly bribed, and when the league found out, they were banned from baseball for life. Keep that in mind.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought this story up because this is fascinating. Baseball Prospectus did a piece on or they mentioned the Louisville Grays, and they talked about specifically how they started. I believe it was 27-3, but then they went 1-15-1.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, a couple of guys start walking around with like diamond tipped canes and nice clothes, and the owner was getting like anonymous telegrams saying dudes on your team are throwing games, and they found out who it was. And they kicked him out, but specifically they had a pitcher named Jim Devlin who was like back there, like one of those guys. He started every game, finished every game.
Mm-hmm.
He came back crying, like crawling, penniless and destitute in rags, begging to be brought back. He said, "Don't do it for me, do it for my children."
Holy
and
shit!
The owner gave him $50 and told him to fuck off. And he said, I can never trust you again because you besmirched the name of baseball. That's how seriously they took this in like 1902.
Yeah. Fuck, man. Baseball's like brand new back then too. Like you've besmirched our beautiful brand new game.
That was the second year of the National League's existence.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. And again, it's like it's so entwined with baseball's history. And back then it wasn't so much don't gamble, it's don't throw games. The stigma wasn't so much about the gambling because everybody gambled. It was just don't fake your way through a game. Don't be disingenuous with the way you play. And by the late 10s, all these scandals started to pile up. There was a noted crooked player and Reds first baseman named Hal Chase, and he was investigated by the league for game fixing. He was involved in a World Series that they thought might get fixed. Just his general behavior felt very suspicious. They didn't find him guilty of anything, but he just had that vibe about him for his whole career where they were like, he definitely fixed some games. And a year later, the Black Sox scandal made waves. There were 8 White Sox players bribed to throw the World Series, and a new commissioner, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, friend of the show, was brought in to clean up MLB's image, promptly banned all the Black Sox fixers, and Landis would make new rules on gambling in 1927, much of which is still on the books today. And this comes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's reflected in these recent suspensions because these rules are still being applied. It's a 1-year suspension for rewarding players from another team for beating a third team. Very common practice back then. I don't think that's in play as much now. But a 1-year suspension for betting on games in connection with which the bettor had no duty to perform. So if you are betting on other teams playing baseball, 1-year suspension. Permanent eligibility for betting any sum whatsoever upon any ball game in connection with which the bettor has any duty to perform, aka if you are on a team and you're betting on that team, permanent suspension from baseball. So for nearly 70 years, there were virtually no gambling-related incidents in Major League Baseball. Pete Rose was truly the first to gain any kind of scrutiny, either because his crimes were so egregious or because he was the only one to get caught. I'm not sure. Nobody's really sure. Either way, he placed bets on the Reds while he served as both a player and a manager and a player manager, and received a lifetime ban from the league and the Hall of Fame. Now, here's an editor's note. Some people like to defend Pete Rose, say he didn't deserve to get banned. His crimes weren't that egregious, blah, blah, blah. Rose may be one of the best performers in the sport. He's still a leader in all-time career hits. He's also a massive piece of shit outside of the gambling. He's guilty of tax evasion, statutory rape, general salaciousness. You won't see me defending Pete Rose here. Plus, icon of the show Bart Giamatti, the too short-lived philosopher commissioner and father of beloved character actor Paul, is the commissioner responsible for banning Rose and keeping shoeless Joe Jackson out of the Hall. Who am I to argue with that legend? But since 1980,
it could also be argued. Yeah, I was going to say it could be argued that Pete Rose killed Bart Giamatti because he died not long after that, and it was widely known around
5 months.
The stress of the Rose. No, I don't even think it was. I think it was less than that. It was not long after that, I believe, but I could be wrong. But it was like the stress of it was the stress of the debacle and the ongoing thing wore on on Bart Giamatti, and it definitely did not help keep him alive. Let's put it that way. So fuck you, Pete Rose, for a variety of reasons, but maybe that one too.
Well, since 1989, there have been a few scandals, but until this year, gambling never really made waves like it has in baseball. So where are we at now? For one, sports betting is fucking everywhere. You can't escape it. There was a landmark 2018 Supreme Court case, Murphy versus NCAA. It was originally brought by the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. Murphy is the governor of New Jersey. It ruled that states have the right to police their laws around gambling, and since then, 38 states and D.C. have legalized sports betting in some fashion. The average American can place a bet instantly on their phone instead of going to a casino. Prior to the 2023 season, FanDuel became the official sports betting partner of the MLB. Almost every team has some sort of official sponsor. In fact, ironically, Marcano gave his post-suspension press conference in front of a backdrop emblazoned with BetMGM logos. Every broadcast has live odds and prop parlays that are plugged several times throughout the game. Sports talk shows regularly provide betting lines and potential props. I mean, it is now a central focus, not just in baseball, but every sport, and it's inescapable.
And gross. It's so gross.
Extremely. Now, those player punishments, as we mentioned, Marcano, then with the Pirates, bet over $150,000 on games. He only won like 3% of them, so he's not even just a gambler. He's a bad gambler. Hence his lifetime ban under Major League Rule 21. The four others were A's reliever Michael Kelly, Padres minor leaguer Jay Groom, Phillies minor league infielder Jose Rodriguez, Diamondbacks minor league pitcher Andrew Sal Frank. They all bet on baseball, but not on their own clubs, so they get the 1-year suspensions. And these are all like pretty minor. I think it looks like Rodriguez bet the most with $750. And the reason why the league found out about these was because these bets were reported by the sportsbook themselves. I don't know which one it was, but it was a legal sportsbook, and they reported these players to the league.
Yeah, absolutely, because they don't want to risk the very lucrative partnership they have with Major League Baseball. So they can capture this down to the foot or like within feet of like the physical location of where these bets are being placed on a cell phone. Like that's how serious they take this.
Yeah. And MLB isn't alone. Like I said, the NBA recently handed out a lifetime ban to the Raptors' Jonte Porter. And 10 NFL players were suspended for gambling violations last year. Although NFL has a slightly different policy, a little more strict, players can't bet on any sport on NFL or related properties such as practice fields or team hotels, which is a little more strict. Baseball, you basically just can't bet on baseball, and you especially can't bet on your own team. Seems like that's like pretty wide open. You can do anything else. I read that like it's pretty common for clubhouses to have like fantasy football leagues, like basketball props are pretty common in baseball clubhouses. So it's not that these guys don't bet. It's just they aren't allowed to bet on baseball. And from personal experience, I can tell you, why the fuck would you bet on baseball? It is the hardest sport to bet on. There's so much left up to chance with baseball.
It's insane, and to go even a little bit further into the psychology of it, these guys threw away really good careers potentially. Tucupita Marcano definitely did, but these other four guys, they're going to lose at least a year and also come back potentially with the taint of being involved with this. And some of those guys were only betting like $25 for. Even the league minimum of like $785,000, you threw that away for a $25 fucking bet.
Yeah. So I got another element of this, and this is how the players have had to deal with the gamblers and the bettors responding to them. And this is from an article from Bob Nightingale for USA Today. MLBPA has voiced concerns for player safety because there's been a rise of because the rise of sports betting has led to a multitude of incidents where bettors have harassed or even targeted players and managers. The latest collective bargaining agreement actually has an amendment requiring teams to be proactive in curbing aggressive behavior from fans towards players when it comes to betting outcomes. It also bans gambling information, betting lines, player-specific performance, etc. from the scoreboard before and during the game. And I think that that's a very, very necessary carve-out that they made in that recent collective bargaining agreement because you've got some fucking maniacs in the crowd. Here's one, for instance. Benjamin Tucker Patz, a 24-year-old sports gambler, pled guilty in 2021 for sending a string of social media messages to 4 players on the Tampa Bay Rays and 1 player on the White Sox after a 2019 game that the Rays lost. Messages included, "I will sever your neck open, you pathetic shit," or something, I don't know, it's expletive. "I will enter your home while you sleep and sever your neck open." Really obsessed with that severing necks. "I will kill your entire family. Everyone you love will cease. I will cut up your family, dismember them alive." He received probation and house arrest, no more than 6 months, and he received no jail time.
Fuck that.
In this article, Paul Sewald, Logan Webb, Taylor Rogers, they're among other players that went on the record. They said that they hear death threats during games, specifically about gambling. They're bombarded with hate messages on social media. They've even had to hide their Venmo accounts because they get like mass requests from gamblers that are like, "You lost me my parlay. You owe me $1,500 or whatever." There was a manager he was not named in the piece, but he apparently received death threats to his personal home address, requiring a police response.
I got no words.
It's not ideal. It's not ideal that we've got players and managers who feel unsafe just because people are betting on their games. And, Tommy Pham had a statement in that. He's like, "Hey, I go to Vegas. I bet on high stakes blackjack. You should never go in with money you're not willing to part with." And I feel like people are learning this for the first time when it comes to sports betting. And the league isn't really doing their part in imparting that wisdom onto people, and people are getting pissed.
Yeah, I think what they need to do is with gambling is what they did in some parts of the world with cigarettes, and like they start putting like pictures of diseased lungs on the packs and stuff like that. Like start leading your ads with that. Don't bury it at the bottom with the fucking Micro Machines guy from those, the really fast talking guy from the 80s, just babbling a bunch of shit in an 800 number that you trying to write down because you're fumbling between your fucking FanDuel app and your phone app or your Notes app or whatever. That's what they need to do. They need to show you the reality of what can happen when this shit gets out of hand.
Yep. 100%. But they're not. There's another element I wanted to talk about with this, and I couldn't really get a lot of good information with the amount of time I had to discuss, to research this. So I just want to bring it up as a thought, but I don't really have any conclusive evidence of it. But I had to ask the question, are these players or these umpires throwing the games like they did 100 years ago, 150 years ago? Because with Marcano's suspension, MLB claimed in a statement that they didn't believe that his gambles had any influence on the outcomes of the games. He was injured for pretty much the entire time that he was making these bets, so it makes sense. I don't think he was getting any inside information on, Andrew McCutcheon hitting a home run that day or whatever. I don't know. But who's to say that there aren't? I mean, you've got to think there's hundreds of players who haven't gotten caught yet, or maybe they're doing the thing like Ipe was doing, where they're making these bets through shady, illegal bookies or whatever. Who's to say that the people that have the most influence on the game aren't influencing its outcome so as to reward themselves with gambling. And I feel like my thought went to umpires too. And you think about how inept so many umpires are, how egregious some of these mistakes are that they make. And you think, there's no way, they must be doing it to make a profit. Now, in the umpire's defense, they are held to the same rules, the same scrutiny that baseball players are. 100%. If they're caught betting on games that that they are involved in, lifetime ban. Full stop. The way some of them operate, I would think, like, would you be surprised? But I don't think it's fair of me, and this is me, the guy that 2 weeks ago said the Royals are cheating, and here's why. And people did not like it, and I'm still getting people mad at me for it. So I want to be entirely fair. I don't want to speak speculatively of the umpires. I don't necessarily think that they are doing this, throwing games. I just think that they have the capability, and the league isn't really doing anything to stop it. So it's like you said, I don't really have any answers about what the future is or any hopes of how this changes, other than maybe you do need to show somebody penniless in a ditch saying, like, this is what will happen if you sports bet too much. I don't know.
I actually think to kind of address your question specifically about the umpires, I think that there is a tool in place already that, if it isn't already deterring umpires from doing that, it will deter them, and that is the umpire scorecards, the umpire auditors, because all it's gonna take is one person who, like, they're gonna notice a pattern somehow, some way, and that's gonna line up with suspicious betting activity on a particular game or games. So I think the increased scrutiny that the umpires have come under in the last 4 seasons now, because the umpire scorecard started in 2021, I think that's what's going to stop the umpires from doing it. And I'm not saying that anybody is right now, but I'm saying that they are an easy target for somebody to do that. They are people who have influence over the game, who do not make nearly as much money as the players do, and who have the shit life of being a professional umpire, with the travel and being away from home and the constant fucking scrutiny of people constantly telling you that you're terrible at your job, which, if you're CB Buckner or Angel Hernandez, is totally accurate. But if you're another umpire,
right,
it might not be so much.
Yeah, I feel like that's why it was unfair of me to say, like, oh, they're probably betting on the games, because again, I started researching it and saying, like, oh, this has literally never happened. The only time it's actually on record an umpire was caught being bribed to throw a game, he reported it, and it was the World Series, and he reported it, and he was excused from the game, but I don't think he got banned, because he did the right thing and said, hey, somebody's trying to fucking bribe me. So he was not allowed to umpire the game. But again, it's like, I feel like maybe I was giving them too much credit, too little credit. Like, no, they're just bad at their jobs. They're not doing it on purpose.
Yeah, it's an extremely difficult thing to do. Like, literally a couple hours ago, Trevor May posted a new video that I happened to watch right away about Angel Hernandez and is he the worst umpire? And he showed some footage from, like, the famous Greg Maddux 78 pitch game, and then the infamous Levon Hernandez game where he was getting calls like a foot off the plate. So umpires are under more scrutiny than ever. I guarantee you they're doing their best, but to say that there is a 0% chance that an umpire is or will do this in the future, or player, you can't say that, because we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen, and we probably will again, especially with the continued rise of sports betting.
Yeah. My closing thoughts on sports betting before we move to our next segment is, I don't think that you can put the cat back in the bag. Is that the right term for it? I think we're fucked. I think that now that people have this access, you can't take it away. Now that the leagues have partnered with them, and it sucks, because sports in general has been not doing great in America, especially baseball. And so they've got this very lucrative thing that comes in and says, here's a bunch of money if you let us put a betting house in your stadium. I mean, like, every time I go to Citi Field, as I ride the escalators up to the poor people seats, I pass by the Caesars betting palace right there on the fucking rich people level. I forget what the levels are called. The rich people level that I can't afford to have tickets. It's right there, and it's always there, and I don't feel like it's going anywhere because, in spite of all these big scandals, and the article I read too that we'll have linked in the show notes. They say at the end, they're like, I feel like the league is very thankful that an Aaron Judge or a, Juan Soto aren't caught in the middle of these scandals. That Shohei Ohtani's interpreter is the biggest name that's in the middle of a scandal like this. And it's mostly less because of his gambling and more because of his stealing money from Shohei thing, depending on what you believe in that story. Because I feel like people still are like, no, Shohei's definitely guilty. Whatever you believe, it is to say, like, thank God at this present moment that there aren't bigger names betting on this stuff, because I feel like it has less to do with the money, because they make plenty of money, more to do with the addiction, the fucking the love of the gambling, and it might happen to a bigger name sometime, and I feel like the league's not really prepared for that. And it's not really prepared to tell the players, okay, everybody, 40,000 people are out there and they all have access to this, but not you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And if I think it's going to take something monumental, like the government gets involved kind of thing before before we try and get this toothpaste back in the tube. And I just don't see it happening. You could find out tomorrow that Shohei Ohtani bet on every game he's ever played in, and they might suspend him for life. And I still think that there's still, even in this day and age, there's still this weird pervasive belief amongst the muckety mucks of Major League Baseball that it's America's pastime and that nothing could bring baseball from its mighty perch. Telling you what, if a Judge or Ohtani or somebody like that gets busted for gambling, it's going to put a level of scrutiny on the league that I don't think that they are really interested in having.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. I don't want to make
100%.
big hyperbolic statements and say the league will not survive, but they don't want it.
But if you are interested in gambling, you can use our code. Put me in coach on DraftKings. No, I'm just kidding. But I do want to absolutely plug, if you feel like you have a gambling problem, if you feel like you might be gambling too much, take a step back. Only gamble. Like, I have DraftKings. I do a little bit of sports betting, but I've truly only put like $10 into the fucking thing. Know when to take a step back. Know when you're like, oh, I've lost 5 bets in a row. Don't touch it for another week. You're good, man. It's a lot easier to do than with a casino where you just run out of money and you're fucked. You have to leave. You can't leave your phone. So, if you have a problem, if you feel like you might be a little too in love with gambling, take a step back. They have gambling hotlines. I don't know how effective they are, but, don't let me be the pot calling the kettle black, because I definitely do bet on sports a lot. Not baseball, though. Baseball's fucking hard. Hockey and football are my betting sports.
Yeah. I'm going to place a bet right now. I'm going to bet that you have no idea who the guy I'm about to talk is, who he is. The guy I'm about to talk about.
To do
I bet you don't know who he is.
Segment. Holy shit! No, I definitely don't know who this is. You win your bet.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. My favorite thing, winning bets where nothing's on the line. Today, in our news segment that we're calling Holy Shit, today's iteration is called Holy Shit, Zoyo Versales. Now, I kind of threw a dart for today's edition of Holy Shit. I kind of threw a dart at the list of MVP award winners, and I managed to land on a fucking doozy. Now, I pride myself, as you know, on my baseball knowing, but even I was not aware of the fact that in 1965, a Cuban shortstop by the name of Zoyo Versales not only won the American League MVP award, he did so handily, earning 19 of the 20 first place votes available for that year's award. The only other person to get a first place vote was fellow Cuban and fellow teammate Tony Oliva. Now, Zoyo Versailles, I don't know how I spaced on this. Zoyo Versalles is how you pronounce his name, was a Minnesota Twin. And that's relevant because Tony Oliva played with him. Thank you. Just want to correct that record real quick. Now, I know that some people have a problem with WAR as a statistic because I don't fucking know why. Because I guess learning new things is hard. But anyway, the stat is relevant in this case because it helps me frame just how holy shit his MVP campaign was. Versalles finished his career with 12.6 B-WAR, or as I like to call it, BWAR. And he accumulated 7.6 of that WAR in 1965. He accumulated 12.6 BWAR. Yeah, right? He accumulated 12.6 WAR in his 12 seasons, meaning that he accumulated 60% of his career WAR in 1 year. That means if you removed his MVP season and that 7.6 WAR from the equation, he averaged 0.45 WAR per season in every the rest of his 11 seasons. And God-tier stat nerd Bill James piled on, pointing out that Versalles' 134 career win shares, which is a statistic that Bill James made up because that's what he does, is the lowest ever total for an MVP winner.
That's wild.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to top this one for a while. Minnesota in 1960. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like this is a good case for why WAR is important. So you can point at things like this and say, here's what this guy did in a season. See? This is fucking wild. And you can really only truly express that through how much winning he brought to a team season to season.
Yeah. And there's another statistic that's similar to WAR that doesn't get a lot of attention called VORP, value over replacement player. And he also led the league that season in both VORP and WAR. So it's not a fluke. He did, perform very well, but this next paragraph is going to kind of make you go, what? How? You'll see. You'll see in a minute. Minnesota was a damn juggernaut in 1965, winning a still to this day team record 102 games and the American League pennant, although they would ultimately fall to the Dodgers in 7 games in the World Series. A World Series famous for the fact that Sandy Koufax declined to be the Game 1 starter because it fell on Yom Kippur.
Oh.
Yeah. In a season, oh, all right, neat. In a season which saw the Twins field 6 All-Stars, Versalles stood above them all at the end of the season. He led the league in plate appearances, at-bats, runs scored, doubles, triples, total bases, finished 3rd in steals while slashing .273, .319, .462. Now, some of the eagle-eared listeners may have caught that not very MVP-sounding slash line, especially the rather low .319 on-base percentage. And that is likely the result of his league-leading 122 strikeouts.
Jesus Christ.
Let's pause and remember a time when 122 strikeouts would lead the league.
or when batting .273 batting average was like not that impressive.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people thought that his teammate Tony Oliva should have won the MVP that year because I think he had like 328, had 98 RBI. Like he had a more statistically impressive season. He also led the league in another ignoble category. He led the league in errors with 39, which makes his 7.6 WAR all the more impressive because holy shit, 39 errors. He made 39 errors. And remember, defense is taken into account in WAR, including the positional adjustment for shortstop. So he made 39 errors and still came in with a 7.6 WAR.
What the fuck? That's like Cleveland Spiders numbers. Like those guys were committing 4 errors a game. That's pretty close to one positional player doing that.
Yeah, and in the best argument ever for advanced metrics and advanced statistics, He was also given a Gold Glove that season.
Of course he was.
Yeah. Fucking why not? Versalles would never even come close to replicating his 1965 season, unfortunately. He would lead the American League in errors again in 1966, and fuck it, why not? 1967 too, before being traded. That's just 1967 also, not like a weird alternate timeline version, 1967-2, where he didn't do that. He was traded to the Dodgers, where he couldn't even break the Mendoza line, but he did manage to improve his fielding, only finishing 4th in errors. He would be left exposed for the 1968 expansion draft, getting drafted by the Padres, but never suiting up for them because they traded him to Cleveland, where he played 72 games, not very well, and was then purchased when you could still do this sort of thing. He purchased by the then new Washington Senators, the modern day Texas Rangers, making him one of only 9 players ever to suit up for both the original and expansion versions of the Senators.
Oh.
He would be released. Yeah, I know, right? Again,
I forget you mentioned the Twins earlier. He was a Senator first, and then he moved with the team to Minnesota. Got it. Okay.
Yes, that's a good point that I should have brought up, but I didn't, because it didn't even cross my mind. He would be released at the end of the 1969 season. He would spend the 1970 season playing in the Mexican League, and then he did play 66 games for the Atlanta Braves. Before being released yet again. He would then play 1 season for the Hiroshima Toyocarp of Nippon Professional Baseball before finally hanging up his cleats for good. He would then go on. He was a pretty decent professional softball player for a while in Minnesota. He suffered a back injury. He had a back hematoma that kind of affected him the rest of his life, but he managed to fight through it. But the story does have a nice, happy ending. He was eventually elected to the Twins Hall of Fame in 2006.
Good on.
So there you go. Zoyo Versalles, probably the most unlikely MVP award winner we will see. Even more likely than the other Twins MVP, or another Twins MVP, Justin Morneau, in his 2006 MVP campaign.
Yeah. No, that's wild. I mean, that is the true definition of what you call a holy shit season. And that's what this segment's all about. It's holy shit seasons. But that's not just a Linsanity run. That's because it's not that good, but it is good. I'm so confused by it. It's like I read a thing the other day that Ellie De La Cruz, shortstop for the Reds, right? He has he has an above average, outs above average stat line, right? But it's actually lower. It's below average for routine plays. It's just that he makes fucking insane plays so well that bumps his outs above average to above average. And it's one of those things that you read and you're like, I don't really get it until you see him play on the field, and it's like, oh, you have trouble transferring over to make a double play a lot, or a regular routine throw to first. But when it's doing the fucking Jeter spin when you're halfway into the outfield and you throw it 100 miles an hour across the field, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, no, he's a phenomenal athlete, but he kind of faces the same things, the same criticisms that Jeter faced. You know, everybody thought that Jeter, back then, everybody thought, oh, Jeter makes these great plays, but he was actually a below average defender because he looked better because he didn't have the range to get to a lot of balls that other guys would. Yeah.
Well, I've learned a lot. Zoilo Versalles. I learned how to pronounce that, so that's good. But hey, man,
because I practiced and I still didn't get it.
That's going to do it for us here at Put Me in Coach. Hope you learned a lot about gambling and our good friend Zolo. And hey, check us out online. We're on all the platforms. Might be a little late with the YouTube video this week, but we're going to try to get it out there. And I wanted to plug my band Space Max has an album coming out at the end of the month. We've got the first single up now at arcticsounds.bandcamp.com, and you can pre-order our cassette for $5 if you want a cassette. And the full album releases on June 27th. I'm incredibly excited for this. I've been working on it for the better part of 4 years now. So it's a Blade Runner inspired concept instrumental album. I'm really proud of it, and I think folks will really like it. And I hope you listen. And otherwise, we got some good baseball on the horizon.
I'm sorry, you said Blade Runner, and that's all I can think about now. It's one of my favorite movies.
Mine too, and I think you can probably tell when you listen to the album that it's definitely a passion of mine to listen to and think about Blade Runner, because it's called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Space" is what we called it, and it's pretty clearly Blade Runner inspired. So.
Yeah. It's called I Heart Vangelis.
There you go. All right, folks. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you guys next week.
Put Me in Coach is an Arctic Sounds original podcast hosted by Matt Coggins and Carl Mizell. Theme music is by Quack Quack Seatback. Edited and produced by Matt Coggins. Check out the footnotes of this episode to see links to all the great highlights, articles, and sources we mentioned on the podcast today, as well as the full theme song and ways to get in touch with us. For more, find us on Twitter and Instagram at PutMeInPod or at our website, putmeincoachpod.com.